2 out of every 3 men chose to electrocute themselves. Not by accident, not under pressure. They were sitting in a quiet room, completely alone, and they picked up a device they had already described as painful enough that they said they would pay money to avoid it, and they pressed the button. Voluntarily. Some of them pressed it more than once. The year was 2014. The study was published in Science, one of the most respected journals on Earth. The lead researcher was Timothy Wilson, a psychologist at the University of Virginia, and what he was trying to understand was one of the simplest questions in behavioral science. What happens when you leave a human being alone with nothing to do but think? The answer should have been obvious. Thinking is free. It costs nothing. You can go anywhere inside your own mind. You can replay your favorite memory, plan your next trip, imagine a conversation you wish you had. The human brain is the most complex object in the known universe. And yet, when Wilson gave people 15 minutes alone with it, most of them found the experience so unbearable that they were willing to hurt themselves just to feel something different. That should disturb you, because you do the same thing, just with a screen instead of a wire. Before Wilson ran the shock experiment, he ran 10 others. He wanted to establish the baseline first, just how uncomfortable is it to sit alone with your own thoughts. He brought participants into a bare room, removed their phones and books and every source of stimulation, and asked them to sit quietly for 6 to 15 minutes and just think. That was the entire task. Think about whatever you want. No instructions, no goal, no deadline. Most of them hated it, not mildly. When Wilson asked them to rate the experience, the majority described it as unpleasant. Many said they had trouble concentrating. Several said they couldn't stop their minds from drifting toward things that bothered them, unresolved problems, anxieties they hadn't dealt with, thoughts they didn't choose to have. A few admitted they felt a low-grade panic within the first few minutes, not because anything was wrong, but because nothing was happening. Here is what makes that finding strange. The participants weren't in pain. They weren't waiting for something. They had been given full permission to think freely about anything at all. And still, something about the experience felt threatening. But what nobody expected was what Wilson found when he analyzed why. When your brain has nothing external to focus on, it doesn't go quiet. It goes somewhere specific. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, a system of brain regions that activates automatically whenever you stop engaging with the outside world. This is the network responsible for mind wandering, for replaying the past, for simulating futures, for constructing your sense of who you are. When you daydream, that is the default mode network. When you lie awake at 3 a.m. running through something that happened 2 weeks ago, that is also the default mode network. And here is the problem with it. The network doesn't wander toward your happiest memory by default. It wanders toward whatever is unfinished, whatever is unresolved, whatever you haven't figured out yet. The technical term for this is rumination, the mind returning, compulsively, to unsolved problems not because it enjoys the process, but because it is trying to close open loops. Your brain treats an unresolved thought the same way a wound treats an infection. It keeps sending resources back to it, whether you want it to or not. A 2010 Harvard study, led by Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert, put a number on this. They tracked 2,250 people throughout their daily lives using a phone app that pinged them at random moments and asked 2 questions. What are you doing right now, and how do you feel? The dataset ended up containing 250,000 data points. And the result was this. People's minds wandered 47% of the time, regardless of what they were doing. And every single time their minds wandered, they reported lower levels of happiness, even when they were wandering toward pleasant thoughts. The wandering mind is, on average, an unhappy mind. Not always, not inevitably, but reliably enough that Killingsworth and Gilbert drew a direct causal line between mind wandering and reduced well-being. Your brain left to itself, with no task, no input, no external anchor, tends to drift toward friction. But what nobody expected was just how far people would go to escape that experience. Wilson wanted to test something specific. Before the shock experiment, he gave participants a small device that could deliver a mild electric current. They tried it once. Then he asked them to rate the experience. Was it unpleasant enough that they would pay a small amount of money to avoid feeling it again? If they said yes, he marked them as shock-averse, people who had confirmed, on record, that this sensation was something they actively did not want. Then he sent them into the room alone. He didn't suggest they use the device. He didn't tell them to. He simply left it there, available, with no instructions at all. Then he left them alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. 67% of the men pressed the button at least once. 25% of the women. These were people who had rated the shock as unpleasant. People who had said they would pay to avoid it. When it came to a choice between their own thoughts and a jolt of electric current, their own stated preferences meant almost nothing. But what nobody expected was the outlier. One participant pressed the button 190 times, in 15 minutes. That is once every 4.7 seconds without pause for the entire duration of the session. The researchers noted it in the paper. They didn't attempt to explain it fully. They didn't need to. The number speaks for itself. Now think about what you do when you're waiting for something. Waiting in a line, sitting on a train, holding for a call that hasn't started yet. How long does it take before you reach for your phone? Research on smartphone behavior suggests the average person checks their device around 96 times per day during waking hours, once every 9 to 10 minutes. Not because something important has happened. Because the alternative, sitting with no input, and the default mode network running freely, is, for most people, more uncomfortable than almost anything else. Your phone is not a distraction. It is a relief. It is the modern version of pressing a button. And the reason it works is exactly the same reason Wilson's device worked. It gives your brain something external to anchor to, something that is not itself. Wilson's conclusion in the original paper was careful and measured, as academic conclusions tend to be. But what it amounted to was this. The human mind, left alone with no task and no external input, defaults to a state most people find genuinely aversive. We are not built for stillness. We are built for engagement. And in the absence of something to engage with, we will find something, even if that something causes us pain. The detail from the 2014 study that I cannot stop thinking about is not the shocks. It is the rating beforehand. Every one of those participants had already told Wilson they didn't want this. They had stated their preference clearly, out loud, in writing. And then, 15 minutes later, alone with their own thoughts, they overrode that preference without hesitation. The mind looking for an exit will take any exit available. You don't need a wire in a room to recognize that pattern. You know exactly what it feels like to reach for something in a moment of quiet. The study didn't discover a flaw. It put a number on something you already knew. It just took a psychologist, a shock machine, and a one-way mirror to show you how far it actually goes. Every glitch reveals the system. Welcome to the human glitch. What is the first thing you reach for when a room goes quiet? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this changed how you see the next time you pick up your phone for no reason, share it with someone who thinks they just need to disconnect more. Because now you both know it is a little more complicated than that.